Greetings, ladies and metal gents, and welcome to today's edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Dread Pirate Josh, written by Ouijan Warrior. The scourge of the spaceways, the human wanted in 7 jurisdictions, the Terran pirate infamously famous from countless tales, octals of songs, and growing number of Tridio videos, took a deep breath as he followed the trail of the borders. Acrid smoke from the heavy breaching charges and the very brief gunfight still hung in the air, illuminated by the flashing alarm lights. He straightened his bright red frock coat, his fat firmly on his head, and smoothly slid his cutlass from its scabbard before he strode into the great dining hall of the luxury liner. He looked around with some satisfaction as gruff-looking pirates secured the exits, kept watch on the liner's crew, and rounded up the last of the passengers, all with the maximum efficiency and minimum violence. He walked to the middle of the large compartment and raised his voice to be heard over the din. "Gentle beings, as you might have surmised at this point, your cruise liner is going to be slightly delayed due to an ongoing pirate situation." The din died away as scores of eyes, echolocators, and other sensory organs swung towards him. He effortlessly got up on the table so that he could be seen from the whole room. "I am Captain Josh." He had to take a short break from the din redoubled. "And it'll be my pleasure of my pirate crew and myself to plunder you today. Pillaging may be arranged. Ravishing is, sadly, not on my agenda today." Joss adjusted the open collar of his ruffled poet's shirt and smiled as he surveyed the passengers. Somewhere in the back of the F's blushed in bright blue before it. She slid to the floor in apparent faint. "We will mainly be relieving you of jewelry, cash, and other easily negotiable valuables today. So I kindly ask that you refrain from trying to hand over IOUs, land deeds, company stocks, livestock, or, and I'm a little baffled that I must remind people, family members." He vaguely bandaged his cutlass, and some of the passengers brought out their personal communicators and started filming. "Your somewhat voluntary contribution to the operation funds will be limited to no more than 8% of your insurance coverage," he continued as he slowly turned around. "So please have your insurance policies ready for inspection as my crew collects your contributions." He paused to shift his eye patch to the other side and swaggered as quite a few female passengers strategically loosened their clothing. Several of the pirates were quietly and purposely walking from table to table, examining paperwork and valuables. Josh smirked, winking as he adjusted his tricorn hat. Several more passengers started filming as the importance of the situation got to them. Josh brandished his weapon again and pointed towards the far end of the hall. "If you are unsure of the value of your not-quite-voluntary contribution, please see our appraiser in the far table before it is your turn to contribute," Josh said, pausing briefly for a scarred pirate to get up on her 3-peg legs and raise her hook in the air for all to see her. "She is fully licensed in 3 jurisdictions and will provide signed certificates of assessed value." Josh smiled and winked at a group of shalvas sitting nearby, 2 of whom unfurled their prehensile fins and fluttered. "If you are currently uninsured," Josh went on as he nodded towards a tall insectoid and immaculate business suit, "we are pleased to offer a 12.5% mail-in rebate for qualifying customers with our main sponsor. Be aware that you have to sign up and pay your first premium before my crew collect your not-quite-voluntary contribution for full coverage." Josh nodded and smiled, swaggering in place as 2 lines of passengers quietly formed. Quite a few ladies of a wide range of species and genders were leaning forward in their seats, eyes and other sensory organs fixated on him. He blushed slightly in a well-practiced manner. "Now," he said as he winked again and dropped his voice slightly, "I know that several of you will be quite interested in experiencing what has been referred to on the Hypernet as Captain Josh's exclusive and titillating kidnapping and ransom adventure." Some of the passengers gasped. Most, however, were either nodding slightly or agreeing more enthusiastically. "If volunteers would be so kind as to form an orderly line by the main exit after you hand over your contribution," he went on in the same low voice, which still carried well throughout the large hall, "we would be most appreciative." He winked again, straightened up slightly as he swung his cutlass in a wide arch. It would simplify the pre-kidnapping credit check and make your experience much more pleasant. Josh shifted his eye patch over again, turning around slowly. Several of the passengers were already making their way to the main exit. Some were chittering in excitement, others were jockeying for position. We only have a handful of berths open at this time, so no couples on this occasion, please. Josh got ready to step down from the table, but paused and brandished his cutlass one more time while smiling. 5 more passengers swooned and slid onto the deck. And, he said with a bit more force, as if he slid the cutlass into the scabbard, and I cannot emphasize this enough, absolutely no minors. End of story 1. Story number 2, Elusive, written by Shane Watson. Andron's feeders twitched in excited anticipation, now that he had captured the Elusive from the Juria's spike of the galaxy. He had a chance to advance. Maybe he would be allowed to mature to a female and start her own hive. He could already imagine getting a Medal of Science for dissecting, describing, and providing an in-depth study of the physiology of an Elusive and the limited technology of the chip. If he could figure out where their homeworld was, it would be an easy colonization for the Grand Hive. Maybe that's where Andron's own clutch would be laid. The automated systems had already dismantled the small ship. It used the crude board technology, distorted space directly around the ship, that his own people had left behind more than 200 generations ago. With a fold drive, his ship outpaced the Elusives by more than 1,000-fold. What was almost unbelievable to Andron was how small the atmosphere in the ship of the Elusive was to that within his own. At first, he thought the Elusive might asphyxiate in the higher pressure, lower oxygen concentration of his ship, but it seemed to be doing fine. If only his computer could figure out its language. When it stopped making noise, Andron walked to its cage, bent its feeders in a mockery of politeness, and spread his forelimbs grasped. Please, esteemed guest, continue to regale me with your tales while my computer examines your noises for any hint of intelligence. He followed it up with a clacking of his mandibles and threat gesture. Rather than shrinking back from him, the Elusive moved to the front of the cage with a speed that stunned Andron. It nearly grabbed one of his limbs and was too close to the cage. With that, it began making noise again. Andron's computer began to catch a few words here and there. Most were inconsequential words, those bits of syntax that held sentences together, and then, but, from, with. It wasn't enough to determine what it was talking about, but the fact that it was talking was obvious. Andron kept an eye stalk on the Elusive, trying to ascertain its mood, even if its speech was impenetrable. He couldn't tell whether the Elusive was frightened, angry, stressed, tired, or bored. Part of him hoped it was anything other than the last. Andron had felt flashes of recognition of a predator at times from the Elusive. It had been watching him closely, but now it seemed not to care what he was doing. That was unnerving. Andron did everything he could to speed up the translation process. He assigned half the main computing cycles to assist the translator. It didn't seem to be helping, though. The longer the Elusive talked, the slower the completion bubble on the translator rose. He began to catalogue the parts and pieces from the captured Elusive ship. There was a strange mix of primitive, like the drive, hyper-primitive, like the heating coils that might have been used for warming the interior or cooking food, or both, and the more up-to-date, like FTL communications array that wouldn't be out of place in his own ship. Among the primitive hardware was a piece that, obvious to Andron, was the ship's computer. He had dismantled it and had spread it across his workbench in no time at all. There was nothing that stood out to him, though. As the actual processor, many of the pieces might have been some sort of processor, but there was no way to contain a quantum loop generator. The Elusive had stopped talking. Andron turned to face the cage, ready to make it start again. The sight of the translator shutting itself off stopped him. It touched a device behind its ear. Then it spoke again. The device behind its ear repeated everything in a mechanical version of Andron's language. Okay, I have what I want. Now I can talk to you. Your translation computer is horrible, by the way, it said. Your name is Andron and mine is Melody. Thank you for the ship and all the new tech. You could have translated it at any time. Of course. I just had to wait until I got the all clear from my ship's computer. The one over there on the bench in pieces. That's all just interface hardware. The computer itself is contained in modules throughout the ship's frame and currently interfaced with your systems, she smiled. I should say, My systems. The expression drove a wedge of icy fear through every joint of his carapace. Andron shrank back and hit the emergency jump button. When nothing happened, he did it again and again. The cage opened and Melody stepped out and stretched. It'll be interesting to see how your artificial gravity works. We captured one from some squid-like things, but it requires being submerged in brine to operate. Your systems are crude, primitive even. There's no way that you've taken control of my ship. Which is it? She asked. Are humans primitives, or are we the boogeyman Elusive that gets blamed for every ship lost in the Perseus arm? You call it Juria, I think, of the galaxy. Computer, detain foreign life form, he called out. When nothing happened, Melody said, Go ahead, computer. Do what he said. A series of moving force fields and shock drove Andron into the cage, which closed behind him. Melody sighed. Again, thanks for the ship and the new tech. Computer, take us home. The fall drive activated, and within the span of a few breaths, the ship re-entered normal space in orbit above Earth. Welcome to Earth, Andron. I'm afraid you're going to be here for a while until we decide whether letting you go is dangerous. What are you doing with my ship? My new ship, Melody asked. I'm going to take it apart so the science guys can study it all. Then, if I manage to get it back together, I get to keep it. End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Caspar Arnholt, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.